So normally when a high drive system's installed, they don't put an external reservoir, but Nordhaven, very kindly, puts in a separate reservoir so that you can see the level, and that gravity feeds into that pump. The only issue that I have leak-wise sometimes is between the little hose that comes from that reservoir down to the pump. Sometimes you can get leaks there. It's probably got a hose clamp on it. So, but to get to that, you have to pull the cabinetry apart in the pilot house, and you can get the backs out of those cupboards, and you can look up inside there and get to the backs of the instruments. You can get to the steering pump, and once in a while, it's worth getting up there. And my recommendation is to leave a clean white oil pad right under that steering pump. That because you're not going to go in there very often, but certainly before you go off on a long trip, like this one even, you might want to open it up, look in there, and just put a fresh clean oil pad up there, see if there's any signs of any leaks.
Okay.
Probably not, because I don't believe we've seen the reservoir go down at all. But that's another reason to have that reservoir there. With the original high drive system, you've got no window, you've got no way of knowing if the reservoir level is going down. The first thing you see, or the first time you realize there's a leak, if you haven't seen it downstairs, is that the wheel starts, you start hearing air, because the reservoir's low and it sucks air into the system. Right? So it's nice having that external reservoir, because at least you can see if it's going down, and you can catch it before you actually suck air into the system. Steering. ATF, right? Keep an eye on the steering rams. So other than the steering pumps, on the shaft, possible leak areas on the shaft, on those connections back there behind the pumps, and on the steering rams, obviously. And as far as for bleeding the system, if you do get air in there, there's a bypass valve between the two manifolds. So there's two steering manifolds in the lazarette port side up against the transom. One for port, one for starboard. So as you turn the wheel to port or starboard, it pushes the fluid down through one or other of those steering manifolds. If you open up the bypass valve, which connects the two manifolds, and turn the wheel, it just keeps on turning, right? It won't move,
no pressure.
It won't move the rudder,
Right.
because the oil goes down one line to one of the manifolds, goes right through to the other manifold, and comes back up to the pump again. So if you have air bubbles in those lines, it's one way of getting those air bubbles to come back up to the pump. Unfortunately, it's not the most efficient way, because the air, depending on how big the air bubbles are, they may not escape when they get up to the pump. If they're small, they might, but if you've got big air bubbles in there, probably some of it's going to get pumped back down again, right? So if you have a lot of air in the lines, the best way to do it is to get long hoses, connect them to, I think the steering manifolds in this boat have vents on the top, so you can vent the air out. You can put hoses on the tops of the manifolds and drop them into a bucket.
And then until
the way we do it, if we're flushing the system, yes, the way we do it is to put a bucket on the flybridge of fresh oil and feed it into the reservoir, have somebody up there making sure that that reservoir stays full so you don't suck air down into the pump, and then just continually turn the pump and pump the air and fresh fluid into the top and pump it out the bottom.
Sounds like a pain in the butt.
It is.
So don't let it go dry.
You have to really plan it out if you're gonna. You can do it by spinning the wheel, but it takes a long time to get all the air out.
Is it something most owners have had to deal with at one point or another?
No, because normally they bring it to us.
Yeah,
we have to deal with it.
I mean.
And flushing the fluid isn't something that people do. In fact, I think probably the fluid on this boat has never been flushed. I'm not saying it needs to be, because it doesn't have many hours on it, you know. And it doesn't. It's not like oil that gets combustion deposits in it. I mean, you know.
No, there's no heat applied to it usually.
No, and it gets warm where it goes through the engine room. So the one place where you will find dirt will catch, and you'll get an idea of how bad your steering fluid is in the AccuSteer pumps. A lot of people don't realize, but there's a filter in those AccuSteer pumps. Now, I don't see a problem with this boat. I have not detected any slow steering. You know, when it comes to the autopilot, you should be able to do hard over in somewhere between 6 and 8 seconds. So we can play with it and see. But if the hard over time becomes, you know, high, if it increases 10 to 14 seconds, then it may be that the filter's getting clogged down there in the autopilot pump. It's a rock filter. It's not a replaceable filter. It's a cleanable filter, and you need a big Allen wrench to get it out. I forget what size.
10 millimeter?
No, it's big.
Bigger than that?
Yeah.
That's a big Allen.
It's not an Allen wrench that you're going to buy in a set. It's one that you have to get.
The biggest one I have is 10
Napa.
millimeter.
Yeah, no, it's bigger than that.
So
So
put
you
that on
unscrew,
our car list.
you unscrew the cap, close off the lines that go to the steering pump, and then open up the cap with an oil pad underneath because you're going to get some fluid out. It comes out with a spring, so make sure that you put it back together the same way it came out. And then use some brake cleaner to clean off that filter. So,
And you what?
No inch, please.
so the bypass valve is important for you to remember, not just for bleeding the system, but if you have an emergency and you need to use that emergency tiller, which you've seen back in the lazarette,
Yeah.
take the cap off there and plug that square tiller, emergency tiller onto the rudder stock. You're not going to be able to move that rudder unless you open the bypass valve, right?
That's okay.
Alright.
Because you're going to be trying to pump fluid, you know, all the way up to the helm, and it just, you can't do it. So the rudder's going to be stuck solid until you open the bypass valve. Likewise, if somebody's been mucking around down there in the lazarette, and this has happened to me a number of times, where you go to pull away from the dock, and that's why you should always check the steering too before you pull away. But if somebody caught that bypass valve when they were squeezing in there to look at the hot water tank and moved it and cracked it a little bit, then the steering isn't going to work as efficiently as it should, because as you turn the wheel, some of that oil is going to slip past the bypass valve. If you turn the autopilot on and it doesn't work properly, you know, at the dock, and it gives you a rudder feedback failure, it could be because that bypass valve's open.
How's it going to give you rudder feedback failing? if
Because
you
when the
don't move it?
autopilot calls for the pump to turn to operate and turn the rudder, but the feedback unit doesn't recognize any motion,
Yeah, but
then
it's not going to call for
it
rudder
might.
motion. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, sure.
You go to
Right.
operate, and we haven't gone over to the autopilot yet. You don't have a jog lever on this boat, but you can use the autopilot to steer the boat.
Right, I did it.
If you
Right
hit left and right together, left and right dodge buttons together, that'll put it into follow-up mode, and you can actually move the rudder.
Right.
And we're going to do that. I'll show you how to do
I
it.
actually do remember that now.
But if you move the rudder and the bypass valve's open, then nothing's going to happen down there. The feedback unit won't move it, and it'll go rudder feedback failure within about 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the manual retrieval bar.
You filming?
Yes. Did you get that?
Mm-hmm.
You lift the drum off, and then you can get to the top clutch. The top clutch will come up. Then you can take the chain wheel off. Oh, you need to take the stripper out. The stripper that strips the chain off. And then you can get to both clutches, and they need to be greased.
Yeah.
And people don't grease them. If they don't have grease on them, they're going to eventually they're going to spin dry in there, and they're going to gall up, you know, and they get stuck.
Greased the one on Sister, I thought, took it apart once.
So here is how you manually retrieve.
Pay attention, Andy.
I am. I see what it is. I want to see how, will you let me check to see?
You see this little cam in here?
Yeah. So
That
you,
cam is so that you can lock it to stop it from going back down,
right.
Okay, so the first thing you got to do is
release that.
release the clutch, right? Now, it can't free fall down because you've got the cam.
Cam in place.
Okay? You drop this into
It ain't going to be
Holy
easy.
Okay.
You have to hire a young big boy for that.
Okay, there you go. You do that about 300 times,
James.
and you may have the anchor up.
Well, maybe
What
if
we
it was
have-
a little better,
What we have done for people is make longer bars.
so leverage.
Yeah, because, I mean, trying to do it with this anchor and this chain, I mean, it's going to take a long time.
I want a big ratchet.